I'd like to thank the Lakeland Community College and the News Herald for having us here today, and Mr. Bertosa and Mr. Collins. It's an honor to be here. I'm very, I can't say that the feeling to be here with the esteemed Attorney General, Mr. Cordray, Mr. Owens, an experienced constitutional attorney, and Mike DeWine, who's a true statesman for the state of Ohio. I do not have any traditional qualification for this position. I'm not a politician. I'm not an attorney. I'm a practicing physician. I'm also a medical researcher in outcomes research. But I'm here because I feel it's important for the country to offer a new perspective. I'm going to be offering some solutions which are out of the box because the in-the-box solutions have not worked. I have experience in outcomes research, which is ways of finding out through scientific and mathematical methods what works, and making decisions in public policy on the basis of what works, not on what's politically expedient. As a couple of the other candidates have mentioned, one of the big forces that got me into the race was the health care bill. I don't think you can have an understanding without actually seeing it. I brought up my printed copy with me, over 2,000 pages. I have a master's degree in health policy and management from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. I've gone through this. I cannot admit to knowing more than 25% of the ramifications of this bill. And the idea that our congressmen, both Republicans and Democrats, tossed it around like a football and passed it without any understanding of what it does, I think is unconstitutional. And it's certainly wrong.
All right. Are you finished? Okay, let's start the other. Let's start with Dr. Feldman and go from left to right. Does the advent of casinos in Ohio present any additional problems or challenges for law enforcement, or doesn't it matter? Would you like to start with that?
Well, the problem I have with the casinos is the problem with big money. And big money is a problem whether it's coming from labor unions, whether it's coming from law firms, whether it's coming from big corporations. We need to get big money out of government. It's bankrupting our economy. It's dragging us down and making us uncompetitive with the rest of the world. And we will never get big money out of our government until we can get the big money, whether it's casino money or law firm money, out of our campaigns. I'll have to take just a moment to mention that when Mr. Cordray announced the $725 million settlement with AIG, my first thought was that should teach the owners of AIG a lesson. But then I remembered that as a result of the bailout, AIG is mostly owned by us. So our Attorney General is suing us. And why would they do it? My calculation back of the envelope was that the most any government worker could expect would be $100 into his campaign from the nearly $1 billion settlement. But
I'd like to be on the point of the casinos and whether that's an extra problem for law enforcement. As I understand, the Attorney General is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the state of Ohio. Is that correct? So is that a problem for that office or not?
I don't agree. The law enforcement is a means to an end. We don't need more law enforcement. We need more law-abiding behavior. We need people to have respect for law and obey the law. And the way we enforce it should achieve that as an end. And I think the casinos are an excellent example. If we're going to have casinos, we need to do it in a way that improves our environment, improves our jobs, and improves the safety and security of the people of Ohio.
Okay, Rich?
Just if I could, on a side point, the AIG case was filed by Jim Petro against AIG for corporate malfeasance, which was grotesque and significant. We have pursued that case to a good resolution. We did not sue the federal government, and the corporate wrongdoers have to be held to account, and that's something we take seriously in every case. As to the casinos, it is going to pose challenges for the Attorney General's office and for local law enforcement across the state. There are provisions in the legislation that was just enacted to implement the constitutional amendment that requires training of gaming agents and others, which will fall to the Peace Officer Training Academy, which I run and operate along with the commission there. There is also money in that bill, conversely, that will go to training of law enforcement officers across the state of Ohio, which is the first funding we've ever really had for law enforcement training, continued training for police officers, sheriff's deputies, and the like. That, oddly enough, is a good thing to come out of this. But certainly, the introduction of casinos into the state will pose new law enforcement challenges. It will open and revive arguments about what we should do to expand skill games and bingo and other types of gambling in the state. And there will be ramifications that will unfold for years to come, I'm afraid.
Okay, what's your opinion on that, Robert?
Jim, it's a great question, and especially to phrase the casinos and link it to crime, because when we saw these issues come through for constitutional amendments, they were popularized as being jobs issues. When you talk about casinos, we're not talking about jobs. We're talking about crime. We're talking about broken families. We're talking about bankruptcies. We're talking about suicide, prostitution, drugs, all of these things. That's the byproduct of casinos. So it has a very real impact on crime issues in the state of Ohio. Now, I think in particular, the Attorney General's office has a special provision dealing with organized crime. It's a special provision that comes out of the Attorney General's office. It's one of the few areas where the Attorney General has much more direct policing powers than would normally be the case. And in this issue, I think it's significant because, again, when you follow the money on these things, what you'll see is that both the Republicans and the Democrats have been taking over $1 million, and in some cases much more, from families and from syndicates that are under indictment for things like bribery, money laundering, all of these kinds of things. This has been plainly reported in the Dispatch and the Plain Dealer, a number of other papers as well. And so this is very much a crime issue. It's very much linked to the Attorney General's office. One other thing, just to respond to what these gentlemen point out, on this issue of AIG, I think one of the things that really comes into play, I think it was beautifully reported by the Cleveland Plain Dealer, is that the claims that Mr. Cordray has made regarding the settlement were way overblown. In many cases, he's taking credit for work done by Nancy Rogers and others. The dollar amounts were grossly inflated by how they played with the dollars. And so I think this is an issue that needs to be discussed perhaps for a later question. Thank you.
Jim, the Attorney General clearly will play a significant role in regard to the problems, and there will be problems connected with casinos. It goes to really the overall view of the office and what the role of the office is in regard to public corruption. I view this office as, in a sense, above politics. When I'm Attorney General, I'm going to call it like I see it, whether it's a Republican office holder or a Democrat office holder. And I will tell you, it would not have taken me, as it did the incumbent Attorney General, 14 months after the first article appeared in the Cleveland Plain Dealer and in your paper talking about an investigation in Cuyahoga County to figure out that, shockingly, there is corruption in Cuyahoga County. It took him 14 months. He was also very, very slow in regard to the man that he endorsed for Attorney General, Mark Dan. He said Mark Dan's going to get in there and clean everything up, and yet it was a long, long time before Richard Cordray spoke out. It was clear from day one that Mark Dan had problems in the office, and it wasn't until the day after every major newspaper in this state said Mark Dan should resign that Richard Cordray, the incumbent, who chief law enforcement officer of the state, said, Mark Dan, you ought to resign. And then this was the man that he endorsed.
We're going to take a short intermission. We have a couple minutes left in this segment. We'll add them on to the second half. So it's not like a football game with equal halves. One's
2-minute warning.
Yeah, one's 2 minutes. One half's 2 minutes longer than the other. So we'll be right back.
Sometimes the things we take for granted suddenly become really important. I always thought Lakeland was for someone else. Then I lost my job. I realized I needed to learn more in today's job market. I needed Lakeland. Lakeland gets you ready for good new jobs. It'll fit your schedule and you can afford it. Lakeland really comes through for us. In Lake County, opportunity starts here at Lakeland.